Your brand is one of your most valuable assets. Every event you run, every touch point you create, every interaction you have is all building the perception of the brand or diminishing that. Good news, you have the power to control that.
I'm Camille Arnold, and this is Checked In.
Brand consistency in events isn't just a design problem. It's a pipeline problem. If your brand looks sloppy, why would anyone trust you with their business? In this episode, we'll discuss how to grow your event program without losing control of your brand. From rogue assets to unclear ownership, we'll break down what goes wrong and how to keep things on track with the right systems and tools. Let's get checked in.
Hey everyone, my name is Haley Kaplan. I come from the experiential marketing team here at Splash. Before we dive in, let me just say, if you're here, you probably feel the pain of trying to keep your brand consistent while your event program keeps growing faster than you can keep up. Maybe you've had a heart-stopping moment when you saw someone use the wrong logo or design, or maybe they use that obscure font that's just like not the vibe. Trust me, you are in good company because I think I can confidently say that we have all been there. But hopefully, by the end of today, you'll be equipped with some solutions to help you fix that. Let's get into our agenda for today. So, we're going to start with understanding why brand integrity isn't just a nice to have, it's a need to have and is business critical. Then, we're going to dive into real challenges that you are facing and then give you building blocks to solve them and share some quick wins that you can implement instantly. We're going to finish today off with some real life examples on cracking this code. So, why brand integrity matters. Some of you might be thinking, look, I've got 47 events to launch this quarter, and I'm supposed to be worried about whether the blue being used is the right blue. I get it. Like when you're moving fast and you're scaling really hard, brand consistency can truly feel like a luxury. But the thing is, it's actually the opposite. Think about where we were just a few years ago. Most companies would host maybe one or two big events a year. And for those big events, you could really obsess over every detail, every color, every font, every piece of copy. It was like planning a wedding. It was stressful, but it's manageable. Now, fast forward today, there's a little thing called event led growth. Event led growth is this go to market motion that uses events as the primary acquisition and retention channel, leading throughout the buyer journey. So you're using events to really fuel pipeline for your company. So from webinars to roundtables to virtual events to hybrid experiences, regional meetups, customer events, prospect events, partner events. I mean, the list truly goes on and on and on. You're actively shifting from that one size fits all approach to creating many different meaningful event touchpoints throughout the buyer's journey. Now, this method is amazing for driving growth for your organization and making your buyer journey even more impactful. But it's also the reason why brand consistency can get really, really tricky because every single one of these interactions or experiences is a brand moment. Every email, landing page, slide deck, follow up sequence, they all connect and represent your company to various different audiences. Now, why does it matter that these things align and what really happens if they go off the rails? I'm not just talking about looking messy. I'm talking about the real business impact from that lack of brand consistency. Well, first, there's trust. When prospects see inconsistent messaging or visuals, their brain goes, wait, do these people have their act together? Is this the same brand that I know? Is this a valid resource or event? It kind of creates this friction. A recent report by Lucid Press found that a consistent brand presentation can increase revenue by 23%. That's not a small amount of pocket change. That's 1/4 of revenue you might be missing out on. So, the importance of remaining on brand as you scale with these events is paramount. Second, perception. Your brand is essentially a promise. When that promise looks different depending on where someone encounters it, it really dilutes your main message. And instead of reinforcing who you are and the value that you bring, you might be confusing people and sending them something that you don't intend to say. And then, third, and maybe the biggest one, pipeline impact. I've seen campaigns where mixed messaging led to qualified leads bouncing because they just weren't sure what they were signing up for. All that time, money, and effort gone. Okay, here is a recent example of brand confusion in real time and how it can impact perception. HBO has been a premium brand for decades, strong, consistent, prestigious. plus home new favorites of mine like White Lotus or The Pit. Then they launched this streaming service, HBO Max. Same content. Suddenly there were two separate brands. Do I need both? Are they the same? Then, as people were just getting used to that, they changed their name to Only Max. Again, confusion. Why? Who did that? Content didn't change. And now they're back to HBO Max. So while HBO is big enough to weather that storm, most of us aren't. We can't just afford to confuse audiences. And since events are truly an extension of the brand, remaining true to brand is incredibly important. Now, I know none of this is news to you all, but the question remains, how can we stay on brand while we scale and not confuse our audience? So let's get into it. All right. So, starting with what is actually happening in the trenches and what are the exact challenges you are facing that's making it super, super hard to stay on brand as you scale. Challenge number one, juggling multiple teams, vendors, or region. You are dealing with many different teams from design agencies to PR firms to production companies to regional teams. I mean, the challenge is that each group might have its own interpretation of an event or your brand. One might think they're doing something to elevate the brand, and another group might want to make it more accessible, and another one just might be trying to spin something up for customers on the fly. And then before you know it, you've got five different versions of your logo, many different looking event pages, and messaging that truly sounds like it came from a different company. I recently talked to a marketer who discovered that their regional sales teams were spinning up off brand dinners using a random website with totally different messaging, brand colors, and no real way to track who was at that event and track the success of it. Which brings me to challenge number two, your lack of centralized tools and guidelines. Picture this, you have a new team member join, and they're wondering where your brand guidelines are. And then you realize the guidelines might be outdated, you can't find current guidelines, or maybe you find them, but they're like 50 pages long, and no one has time to parse through a novel every time before they create a new event. You're missing a central area where your brand guidelines automatically populate, and it's really hard for people to be able to go rogue. And then we come up to challenge number three, which is poor visibility into what actually is being created. You're locked in on improving and approving the big main event assets, but what about everything else? You know, those email templates, those on demand pages, regional variations, mini events. It's like playing whack a mole with your off brand content. You fix one thing and then three more pop up. You feel like you're constantly in this reactive mode instead of being proactive. It's not a lack of design or messaging. It really does boil down to having the right systems, processes, and communication in place. So let's dive on into the building blocks you need to actually keep events on brand as you scale. So, I'm going to start by giving you three foundational building blocks that every scalable on brand event program needs. Number one, strong brand guidelines. First things first, you need brand guidelines, not ones that are sitting in a filing cabinet collecting dust. I mean, living, breathing guidelines that your team actually uses. I'm talking visual guidelines that actually help instead of just saying, use these colors, and they have examples, good and bad, to iterate what things should actually look like. Also, having some messaging guidelines when someone uses your brand voice, what does that sound like and look like? Include kind of how to write subject lines, describe events, what words to avoid or to use, and tone. And finally, have really event specific guidelines. What does your brand look like on a webinar slide? What do certain event programs look like? And I know this might not fall under your specific purview, but it's incredibly important when it comes to scaling on brand events. Thankfully, Splash has an incredible design and content team that really has spent time putting together brand guidelines and resources to make it easy for anyone, a part of the brand or not, to understand the brand and grab resources from the brand, write copy that sounds like it's coming from Splash, or even event pages that look and feel on brand. You do not need to create this in depth of a resource, but you should have a central place where you can find this information. And it's super prescriptive for everyone involved because the easier that you make it and your teams make it to be on brand, the easier it becomes to create events and content and copy that feel and look on brand too. Now, it is one thing to have strong brand guidelines, but the next level of this is to scale your events and make this happen And the way to make this happen is truly having the right tech in place. So, which brings me to our building block number 2, having a supportive tech stack for brand control. You can't scale brand consistency with good intentions alone. I mean, we would all want to, but that's just not the case. You need technology that truly makes it easier to do the right thing and makes it really, really hard to do the wrong thing. So, what does tech like that look like? So, first thing, it has to have design guardrails. You want to look for tools and tech that prevent common mistakes. Can someone accidentally use a color not in the brand? Can they resize a logo? The best systems for your tech for scaling events makes it truly impossible to create off-brand content. So, for example, Splash's brand library, as an admin to this tool, you can upload your logo, brand colors, fonts, etc., so that anytime someone creates an event, these design guidelines auto populate for your team to build an event page. A consistent brand experience builds trust and affinity with your audience. And so you really want a tech that allows you to upload your assets once, your colors, your fonts, your logos, and afterwards, every touch point of the attendee journey gets automatically synced and branded to perfection. Number 2, the second thing that your event tech should look like is it should have some type of templatized system. So instead of starting from scratch each time for an event, your team should be able to easily pick and choose between different event templates, from the event page itself to all of your different event touchpoints like confirmation pages, invite emails, reminder emails, and so much more. The key in this area is to make sure that these templates are easy to customize without breaking the brand. So, for example, Splash's branded themes is a place in our system where you can build an event theme for a certain event program, per se, and then your team can easily create an event from that theme. So, no matter who creates a new event, as long as it's coming from that theme, it will be on brand and compliant for your programs. Using a pre-built theme to create an event gets you 90% done with setup in just a few clicks. So you really want to make sure that your tech that you're getting for your scalable events has those design rails and has those event template systems in place to make it really, really easy for anyone to spin up one of those on-brand events in minutes. Now, maybe the most important piece that your event tech needs is that team management or user permission functionality. Your event tech should be able to assign and customize certain user roles, allowing for collaboration across teams. For example, if you have a sales team member in your event platform because they're spinning up a sales led event for high profile prospects, and you created a theme just for those events, you should be able to only allow that specific team access to create events from that theme, ensuring that they stay on brand no matter how many events that they spin up. So, for example, Splash offers 7 different roles to support that modern marketing team. Each role includes its unique set of permissions and access to the platform. You can also customize roles to meet unique needs and segment team members into groups, such as like different departments or regions, and only allow certain departments to see certain event templates. So, it's really easy to navigate, and you want to make sure that your tech is equipped to handle that. So, for instance, if your regional sales team, they might not have the same access to an event template that your general marketing team might have, and they can only act from those approved templates, making scaling super, super easy and compliant. All right. So, your building blocks. You've got to have strong brand guidelines. You've got to have the right tech and stack for brand control. And then the third, and maybe one of the biggest ones, internal enablement. Now, you can try to solve brand compliance by adding in more approval steps, checkpoints, and bottlenecks, but sometimes it just slows things down and frustrates your team. Instead, to scale, you really, really want to empower your team to create on brand content and events without having to ask permission every single time. So, you want your internal enablement to have brand education. Your team needs to understand not just what your brand looks like, but why it matters. When someone understands the why and why that consistent messaging and brand increases conversion rates, they're more likely to care about getting it right. Second thing that your internal enablement needs, clear ownership. Who is responsible for owning this brand compliance for all of your events? Is it marketing? Is it design? Is it everyone? That answer should be super, super clear so that everyone across the org knows who they should go to get the tools and authority they need to enforce those standards. And then the other thing that your internal enablement needs is feedback loops. You need systems to catch problems before they become public, regular audits, peer reviews, approval workflows, whatever works for your team size and your team speed. So, this is just an example of what an approval flow will look like, and I'll kind of dive into this a bit later. But as you can see, your requester might want to create a new event, so they submit it through a form to the approver, and then the approver can either approve or deny that event. And it only enables seamless scaling, but also brand compliance. All right, so here is the thing about these building blocks and how they all work together. They're not separate initiatives, they do work together. Great guidelines inform your technology choices. Technology and the right technology makes enabling the team easier. And good enablement reduces the need for heavy handed guidelines and allows you to scale seamlessly. All right. So we talked about the big three blocks to ensure you can stay on brand while you scale. So I want to get into some actionable tools and tips that you can implement immediately to get this and make it happen. All right. So starts with an internal audit. I know it's not fun and it's not glamorous, but doing an internal event audit allows you to identify your scaling weak points. Instead of auditing a random asset, start by identifying your various event types, like your webinars, field events, customer events, VIP events, whatever those main event buckets are. Because the best way to scale on brand events is to look at your event as a programmatic event type. So when someone wants to throw a field event in a new city, you view that event as part of a larger event program or event type, ensuring that it scales up and on brand compliantly. When auditing these types of events, make sure you track which events kind of fit into this scaled programmatic approach and which ones might not fit. So check on how many of each event type you do, who owns those events, where in the buyer's journey do those events fit. All of these qualifying questions are super important to distill down what events are keepers and which events are just not fit to scale in a programmatic event type. Once you take inventory of your events and audit which events fit where, then you can audit your specific event assets. So, you know how before a big event, you make sure the venue, the tech, the catering are all good to go. Your event assets deserve that same kind of pre check. Ask yourself, are all of our registration pages for webinars visually aligned with your current look and feel? Do your email templates match your messaging, or do some feel like they're from a different era? Are your speaker decks a random mix of fonts and styles, or do they look like they belong into one unified brand? You'll see quickly patterns. Maybe your webinars are perfectly on brand, but your field events look like they came from different companies. Or your customer events have consistent design, but completely different messaging. I've seen teams host amazing events that end up looking disjointed simply because someone used the wrong color palette from last year or a different event logo from last year. One quick way to fix that is just to schedule a quarterly brand event cleanup. Literally block a couple hours on your team's calendar to review and update your event templates from name badges to social graphics. It's simple, but it prevents a lot of last minute stress and helps to keep your event programs on brand as they scale and grow. All right, actionable tip number 3. We are going into have a scale ready asset library. Now, I understand this is another easier said than done type of situation, but once you do this, you can let it fly and maybe update it once a quarter. When you're running 20 plus events a quarter, you can't recreate assets every single time. Here's a simplified way that you can build out an asset library for your event types that's actually designed to support scaling and not just organization. First things first. Again, defining your event templates for each event type. All right, so you took an audit of your various events and then your event programs, your webinars, your dinner series, your roadshows. Now, what does your gold standard template for one of these events look like? Like your perfect event page for each event type. So, for example, a standard webinar For us, maybe it's a top of funnel webinar. You have your event registration page, your email sequence, invitation, reminder, thank you, follow ups, slide deck with maybe 15 or so slide variations, social post template, feedback survey, agenda template, maybe a couple other items. This is your essential kind of webinar or event in a box template. So, anyone who wants to create a webinar to the top of funnel audience or whatever that event type is has a template to go off of and can just update images or copy that's specific to the event itself. And then the second thing that would make these event templates work for you and for scale is to have instructions for each event template. I know, sounds tedious, but the more work you put in the front end makes it so much easier to scale in the back end. So these instructions can include what you can customize. So if you have your template, you can customize the date, the event name, speakers, location details, and maybe specific bullet points to that event. Things that you cannot customize. So things like don't touch the brand colors or where the logo is, or if there's core messaging to an event, or even legal and disclaimer text on an event page. And then you want to include some common mistakes to avoid if you have any best practices from your organization. And then you also want to have some type of quality control checklist. So before someone launches one of those events, they should look at this, they should look at that, whatever it is. Those are going to be the instructions that you want to include. Having these instructions allows you to have guardrails in place while still allowing independence for scale. All right. So next, you want to track your progress somewhere. I am horrible at tracking my progress or writing down my timestamps on stuff. This is not one of those areas that you want to skip when you're trying to scale your events and scale them on brand. Like you really want to track your progress of everything you're doing with this audit that you do. So make sure you're trying to use the same naming convention for your different templates. So it could be like template, event type, what version it is, and then the date. That way you can look back on what you've inventoried and track things like when it was updated last, who updated it, if anything was changed, or even the next review date for this template. That's what allows for that feedback loop to occur and a way for people to access an event template is ready to scale out or not. One of our customers' event creation time actually dropped from 8 hours per event to 2 hours per event just by building out a proper scaling library. And more importantly, their brand consistency scores went from 60% to 95% because people were being using those tested and approved assets instead of creating from scratch each and every time. So the big key takeaway I want you to take from this have a scale ready asset library is that it isn't just about organization, it's about making the right choice the easy choice, even when you're moving fast. That's kind of how you design events to stay on brand when you scale. All right, moving into actionable tip number 3, creating an approval flow. This does not need to be something you set up in your event tech. It could be a channel in your Slack workflow or a Google form or whatever type of request form is best suited for your organization. When you are scaling and launching multiple events, one off brand asset can accidentally get replicated across dozens of touch points. I think for a moment there, I was using like a duplicated event page for like 3 different events, and there was a part of it that was not compliant anymore. And I was like, oh no, get me back on the template. So it happens, but you want to make sure that there is a quality control system set up so that things do not slip through the cracks. So it could be as simple as assigning an event guardian for each event type, and they just kind of give it a good thumbs up if it's good to ship or if it needs work. You could create a Google form where someone fills out the event information and the type of event they're wanting to do, and that event guardian can approve their request and then send them that proper template to get started. And you can keep track of all of these requests in an Excel sheet or something that allows for visibility into all that's happening at your organization. It does not need to be a task you do in silo. None of this should be tasks you do in silo. You should be working with other relevant team members to build out this process at scale. So make sure you get all of your other leaders involved so that everyone's on the same page. Because when you're scaling events, you can't afford to wing it. You need systems that work whether you're running 5 events or 50 events. And these tactics are specifically designed to maintain quality as you grow volume. The magic happens when these work together. Your audit shows you which event types need attention. Your asset library makes consistency easier to achieve. Your approval flows identify problems before they compound. Now, I'm going to share a quick story from a customer who's actually scaled 250 plus events. So, if you would have told the global marketing ops manager AppsFlyer, a marketing analytics measurement attribution and data platform, to trust her event process back in 2020, she would have said, I can't. We don't have a process. So, like a lot of the industry at that time, she and her team were making the pivot to event led growth fast. They had a lot of events that they wanted to run at various different stages in their buyer journey. They just had a few problems. The first being that their team didn't find their current platform to be the most user friendly, and they were unwilling to use the tool, but still needing to get these events out the door. And the team really relied on one off Zoom event pages to fill that gap. And the disruption naturally caused a slew of other side effects like inconsistent branding across event, unmanageable lists that put them at risk of spamming customers, mismanaged data. They really needed a solution that would allow them to be self sufficient, but it also needed to give our marketing ops manager and the rest of her team the control they needed to ensure every event was on brand, compliant, and collecting and syncing data correctly. So, the solution, she needed those standard templatized and automated integrations. Having been a previous customer at AppsFlyer, she came and returned to Splash in need of those very specific requirements. It needed to be easy, scalable branding. So, knowing the power of brand consistency, we've talked about it a lot today. The AppsFlyer team needed a way to ensure that every event and every touch point were always on brand. They really enjoyed Splash's custom templates. They built out a library of branded templates that the team could choose from. Anything they don't want the team to use or access, they can lock down with admin controls. With templates already branded, all the teams needed to do is update their page with relevant event info. There was no additional design needed or web team required. Next, they needed that standardized data collection. So you could have all the data in the world. It doesn't matter if it isn't correct or connected to the rest of your systems. So, our form library allowed the AppsFlyer team to create a set of compliant forms for their event organizers to use. The form responses were all mapped to relevant systems to maintain data accuracy. And if they need to edit anything on a form, they can do so in one place. And every form their team uses would automatically change. And then the last thing that they wanted were self serve integrations for Zoom and Marketo. One of the biggest responsibilities that her team specifically kept speaking to one another about is how data was flowing correctly between them. Using our Zoom integration, her team was able to automatically create webinars, sync and update attendees all without even logging into Zoom. And with our Marketo integration firing in the background of every event, their team members really rest easy knowing that the right data is syncing exactly where it needs to. The team was happy because they were getting all of that information that they needed. They went from frustrated regional marketing managers to happy independent managers who host their own events quickly, easily, and on brand. It's really friendly for them. And as far for operations, all that data is being synced simultaneously and correctly. And then the result was process independence and an event program designed to scale. With compliant forms and on brand templates in place, their team had a standardized ways to quickly create events that adhere to brand and data guidelines. And she shared that once the team had streamlined workflows in place, they gained a sense of independence. And this independence allowed Outflyer to scale and grow their event program over the last 3 years to over 250 events in 6 continents and reduce their event SLA from 1 to 2 weeks to 48 hours. And then along the way, collecting almost 40,000 RSVPs. So she likes to sum up her success by saying simplicity of creating an event has made a big impact. So clearly for AppsFlyer, Splash was the unlocker for them, but I think it speaks volumes how important it is if you want to scale on brand events to have the right tech, the right processes in place, the right enablement, and the right brand guardrails to make scaling events seamless, easy, and compliant. Our key takeaways. So, what we covered: one, brand consistency is not about just looking pretty, it's about business results. It affects trust, perception, and ultimately your pipeline. Two, the challenges you're facing are very real and they are common. So, do not feel alone. We're all in this together. Multiple teams, scattered tools, poor visibility, those aren't personal failings. They're systematic issues that need just some systematic solutions. Number three, the building blocks of success are clear: usable guidelines, tech that supports compliance, and team enablement that empowers without losing control. You don't have to fix everything all at once. Start with those little quick wins. Audit your assets, create checklists, build your ideal template, and appoint brand guardians. If you wanted a next step before you jump into your next meeting, take 30 seconds and write down one thing you would want to do differently this week. Just one thing. Maybe it's audit one of your events, or maybe it's looking at 3 different teams and what events they're throwing. Maybe it's having a conversation. But that's kind of how change happens. It starts with one small step at a time. And then, final thought, and something I want you to remember: your brand is one of your most valuable assets. Every event you run, every touch point you create, every interaction you have is all building the perception of the brand or diminishing that. Good news, you have the power to control that. With the right systems, processes, and mindset, you can scale your event program without sacrificing brand integrity. In fact, you can use your brand as a competitive advantage. All right, folks, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, take care.
Thank you for listening to Checked In. To get connected and learn more, visit splashthat.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.